The Duke Blue Devils were so confident in their foolproof multi-year contract with quarterback Darian Mensah, they were willing to take it all the way to court up until they weren't. Now that it's over, the precedence has been set. Can you really build a roster year over year anymore, or is it really a one-year wonder?
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Feels good to be back, my Big 12 brethren. Shout out to the regulators, a.k.a. everydayers. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stillwater. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms and visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at All-Day State. We get to roll right into this conversation of, can Oklahoma State, or very many places not named Indiana, build a roster year over year over year? Like Mike Gundy always said, if we do things the right way, every 3 years, we will have the roster that we need to compete for a Big 12 title and potentially do more. It does kind of feel like, with the Darian Mensah news and some of the other transfer portal news that we've received over the last few years, that building a roster 3 years away from now almost seems impossible. Because is Oklahoma State a step above Duke? Absolutely. But still, he went from Tulane to Duke to Miami. And Duke thought that they had the multi-year contracts and the things in the back end figured out, so much so that it would be very difficult for Darian Mensah to leave. He didn't think so. He just decided, I'm going to go. I know I signed a contract. I know that there's still some obligations probably on that deal, but I also know that's the University of Miami. And if the University of Miami can't get me out of this situation, then nobody can. But it also brings up the question, what's to prevent the Miamis and the Notre Dames and the Michigans and the Ohio States and the Bamas and the Georgia of the world from constantly doing this? I mean, there's a lot of conversations about Dabo Swinney and that there's tampering. There's tampering all day, every day at 99.8% of the schools all across the country. So I don't necessarily think that's part of this conversation. But what is part of this conversation is, can you build a roster with multiple year contracts being the backbone? Because it appears as though that's not the case. And yeah, Duke and Darian Mensah reached some sort of agreement, right? Likely Darian Mensah probably had to give something back to Duke or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, Duke tried to do everything possible to keep Darian Mensah. They thought that they had this thing sewed up until they didn't. And then again, at the end of the day, it's got to be people at Miami saying, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the NCAA. Don't worry about Duke. Don't worry about, just get here and we'll figure it all out. And they were able to do just that. Now, I'm not saying that it's just because it was Miami that made this happen, but it does add question marks for Oklahoma State fans. Drew Mestemaker is on a 2-year deal. Caleb Hawkins, I think, is on a 2-year deal. Wyatt Young, I think, is on a 2-year deal. A lot of these players coming over are likely on multiple-year deals, but as we have just witnessed, that doesn't mean a hill of beans. Now, I know Oklahoma State specifically has a lot of backloaded stuff. So, like, if you enter the portal and before a certain amount of time, you're not going to, get your full contract that you signed. So I understand that there is some things in the back end of these contracts that are trying to prevent some of this. But again, who's to stop a Miami from saying, don't worry about it. If Oklahoma State gives you any penalties, or we'll take care of it because we're Miami. And Oklahoma State will likely never be Miami. Of course, people are going to point to the outlier being Indiana. Curt Cignetti was able to do that. If he's able to sustain it, obviously, that'll be incredibly important. But I think he will be able to sustain it because he's built up that cachet so quickly. He's now turned Indiana into a place that is pretty desirable. It is very possible for Eric Morris to do something comparable because, a lot of the players that could have left North Texas this previous season, they didn't, but not all of them. And you would assume that the Big 12 play and Oklahoma State would have a lot more capabilities at retention of talent. But it almost feels like the Wendell Gregory's of the world are always going to end up elsewhere unless you have something, sustainable to reach into. Indiana has sustainability because of instantaneous success. Curt Cignetti was able to do it so quickly that I do think that it added a lot of validity to Indiana, which is why they're having a lot of success, again, in the transfer portal. But they were the oldest team in the country this previous season. That is one of the biggest reasons why they won so many games. That's one of the biggest reasons they won the national championship. So a lot of those guys dated back with Curt Cignetti for 3 to 4 years. And it's going to be really difficult for that to happen at a place like Oklahoma State. I mean, heck, look at Cincinnati. They had a phenomenal rebound. They had a really good year, but they couldn't keep Brennan Sorsby. If Drew Mestemaker puts himself in Heisman contention at the end of the season, who's to stop Georgia or Bama from poking around the entire time to get a Drew Mestemaker? It's going to be more difficult than ever, I think, to build that roster up. To have that, we used to have Cowboy Culture that carried that locker room. So every new freshman class had to abide by this level of standard, and they had to do X, Y, or Z. We clearly got away from that Cowboy culture and that standard that was set at Oklahoma State for such a long time in the last 2.5 years. So it'll be interesting to see what Eric Morris brings into the fold. It's also interesting to see a lot of these multi-year contracts mean a whole lot of nothing. And again, that was my first thought, is a lot of the stars that Oklahoma State was able to bring in, a lot of them are on 2-year, 3-year deals. But as we just witnessed, it doesn't mean anything. If you're a blue blood, those contracts that you signed at that little old Big 12 school don't mean crap to them. They'll take whatever fees and penalties and this, that, and the other, because they know historically they have protections from places that Oklahoma State does not have protections from, right? That 4-lettered entity we shall not name at this very moment. But it just kind of feels like with this Darian Mensah thing coming down, that contract, and Duke's a very prestigious university, so I would assume that legalities-wise, the contract was pretty foolproof. But they still found a way out of it. And again, I don't know that it's because it's Miami that it has any bearing in this conversation, but we are Oklahoma State University. We are not Miami, unfortunately. We're not Texas. And talking about instant credibility, Curt Cignetti was able to do that at Indiana. It appears as though Joe McGuire was able to do that to some degree at Texas Tech. It feels like if Eric Morris is able to capitalize in the next 2 years, then perhaps we could follow that Indiana, that Texas Tech kind of model. But if not, we're going to have to be fending off the Miamis of the world for the Drew Mestemakers and the Caleb Hawkins and the Wyatt Youngs on a continuous basis, year after year after year. That's my biggest fear, is because as much as we bleed orange, as much as we can talk about having so many successful seasons and so many consecutive 18 bowl games and all of that fun stuff, it's what have you done for me lately business. And Eric Morris has done a remarkable job bringing over the North Texas talent that they had identified that they needed. He's done a remarkable job keeping some of the talent that they evaluated as individuals that they needed to keep around. Did we miss out on a few guys? Yes. Did we get into bidding wars or refuse to get in bidding wars over some guys that we maybe probably should have? Yeah, for sure. But at the same point in time, if you're winning, that typically solves a lot of things. Again, Curt Cignetti took a lot of the guys that had been with him for 3 years, and he turned it into an 11-win season, and then he turned it into a national championship. So now, any transfer in the country is going to want to go play for Curt Cignetti in Indiana. But if it had gone differently, if his first year they went 8-4, and the next year they won 10 games per se, then I don't think that Indiana would be having the same success that they're having in the portal right now. I also don't think that they would be having the consistency in retention of talent. It's because a lot of these guys played for Curt Cignetti for multiple years, I think is what allowed this continuity. And then that puts you in a position where you can be a sniper in the portal. So you have this returning amount of talent, and I need an offensive tackle. I need a middle linebacker. I need a defensive end, so on and so forth. That would be the ideal scenario. I am just slightly concerned as an Oklahoma State fan that what we just witnessed out of Darian Mensah could easily be applicable in Stillwater after this season. Let's just say that Oklahoma State, after a 2-win season and a 1-win season, let's say Oklahoma State goes 9-3 next season, right? Probably not good enough to play for a Big 12 title. Definitely not good enough to be in the CFP, but remarkable given the turnaround. Well, is 9-3, is that good enough to get Drew Mestemaker and the Caleb Hawkins and all of those, the Ollie Gordon style guys to come back yet again? Time will tell. But this Darian Mensah news, I don't know. Doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies for all of these 2-year, 3-year contracts that we were able to put together. Yes, in theory, that level of commitment, it should be a big deal, right? We as adults look at it as like when you sign a contract at work, like that's it. That's your contract. If you sign a non-competition clause and you try to go out and immediately, compete against your previous employer, you're going to end up in hot water. So there's a lot of legalities that Duke probably thought they had lined out. And turns out it didn't matter. The contract didn't matter. The longevity didn't matter. The amount, realistically, in the end, didn't matter. Because if you do leave, you're going to lose some of that backloaded stuff. But evidently, it would appear as though Miami said, don't worry about it. Darren Mintz said, whatever you lose, we'll make right. Whatever grief Duke gives you, we will find a way to help you with it. And now it's a done deal. So I think the precedence has been set that if you're in Oklahoma State and you have a Drew Mestemaker, the chances of you keeping him next year are pretty darn slim. And that's scary. It almost feels like that building it for every 2-3 years to have that competitive championship level roster. It almost feels like it's a year-to-year race at a place like Oklahoma State. Let me know down in the comment section, obviously, if you disagree. I hope I'm incorrect. I hope that I'm just freaking out for no reason. But we have a lot of multi-year contracts, and we have a lot of talent. And it's going to take a lot for Oklahoma State to even be in consideration for playing for a Big 12 title or the CFP. So, I don't know. Maybe we're putting the cart before the horse, but color me at least slightly concerned. You do not need to be slightly concerned if you have a Mazda to rock around with. This is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who show there's more than just the score, there's more than what's just on the screen. Mazda is going to help remind us of what really matters in life and what it really takes to raise the bar. It's about the extra work off of the court, off of the field, right? Being willing to put in the time to dial in every single detail. Given the extra fire and the never quit attitude, that pure grit that comes from the right rig is important for you. And Mazda can put the same passion into every single model just for you. The highlights make it real. So what it takes to get there means more. It counts more when you have the right rig to get you there. There's more to Mazda, and you need to be a part of what Mazda has cooking because there's also more to you. Make sure that you get squared away today to go check out Mazda so you can move and be moved by Mazda. All right, now we're going to talk about some of the guys that did, in fact, return, right? We're sitting here talking about whether you can build a roster over a certain 2-3 years span, or is it more of you got to win this year with this roster, or you're going to risk losing half of them, whether it be to the NFL or the portal or retention or whatever the case may be. You got to have some of these guys, some of these Cowboy Culture dudes. It is very evident that we got away from that the last couple seasons, and having conversations with some of the guys in the locker room, it is different than it used to be. But thankfully, we've got some dudes that are still part of that original Cowboy Culture stuff that did in fact matter. It's crazy to look at it now, but guys, we're now looking at a 5th-year version of Deshaun Brown. We're looking at a 5th-year version of Landon Dean and Cameron Epps and Jaleel Johnson. Like, it's pretty cool to think about the fact that, yes, it's all brand new in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and the roster's new, the staff, the strength and conditioning, the things that have been a cornerstone for Oklahoma State for 20 years, it's all gone. It's all new. It's all different. And it seems to be, in large parts, for the better, right? I talked to somebody today, and they talked about there's a position group that hung out for literally like 10 hours yesterday. That position group had never done that the previous 2 years. There had never been a day in the last 2.5 years where one unit spent all day together, right? You're talking about going out to eat, going out to shop, going around mudding, and doing stuff that you would think would be pretty normal if you're trying to, galvanize a locker room. But the players are saying, Cody, I haven't done this my entire time at Oklahoma State. My last 2.5, 3 years here, we never did any of this. It was more, combative at times. There was competition, which you need to have competition, but it was unhealthy competition at times, so much so where that the coaches would drive wedges in between positional groups. And that stuff is changing. I've heard the nutrition has completely changed. The workouts have changed. They're doing far more plyometric stuff. Rob Glass was good about packing on pounds. Rob Glass was absolutely fantastic about getting your body fat right. But some of the side-to-side, the virtual plyometrics seems to be something that has now been incorporated that these guys are a little bit more used to. They can already feel their flexibility improving. And if you have more flexibility, you're likely to have less injuries. Again, I'm not on that, well, it's Rob Glass's fault we had all the injuries hill. Not on that hill at all. But there is at least an argument to be had in regards to how the body can function differently given a different strength and conditioning coach. And I think you're seeing some of that. Malik Charles, him coming back, I think is a very, very, very big deal. He's probably just barely scratched the surface of what he could potentially be. Amon Oates is in this camp. It's so glad to hear that he's likely going to have the opportunity to come back for another season, especially because we're hurting pretty bad for defensive tackles. But you do have Luke Webb sticking around. That's one of those guys who could easily slide over and be, a cornerstone down low. Jameis Maya's sticking around. Jacoby Sanders, obviously sticking around. Stillwater High School guy. It appears as though Jimmy Cook might still be rocking around. He's not like part of the old school crew, but he was here last year, right? So it's fair to include him. Getting Ladaney and Fields back is absolutely massive. I think Caleb Hackelman, 6'6", 300-pound offensive lineman. He's kind of been biding his time, putting in the work. I think he's a big addition to come back. Here's the biggest thing. Whenever this new coaching staff did all of the film evaluations, they had all of the practice film, and they had, if you played in games, they had some of the game film as well. They went through all of the players that had the possibility of coming back, and they decided that, this group of players, we have to find a way to get them back here. This next group of players, we'd like to have them back, but there's a certain number that we're not willing to go over. And the fact that guys like Caleb Hackelman and Luke Webb and Kobe Foreman and Gunnar Wilson, the fact that these guys were part of that crew, Miguel Chavez, of, okay, we've done your evaluations. We know you had a terrible time at Oklahoma State the last couple of years or last year. You haven't done a whole lot of winning, but we have evaluated your talent as good enough to be here. Matrell Lopez and Cam Powell coming back. Absolutely massive. Guys, if Matrell Lopez hadn't had an injury this previous season, he would have been playing significantly earlier, which means he probably would have been factored into the game plan a little bit more. Carl Young is a big one. Aiden Webb coming back. It's kind of not talked about a whole lot, but a very, very big deal for Oklahoma State to get this done. So shout out to who are now the OGs. But again, Jaleel Johnson and Deshaun Brown and Cam Epps and Landon Dean, those are like the OGs. You have Trip White coming back, so I think that's going to be very big for the linebacker core this season. But all in all, those guys were part of the Cowboy culture that did, in fact, make Oklahoma State successful for 18-plus years. So if you can take that and converge it with what we're hearing now, yeah, Oklahoma State could be in a position where competing for a Big 12 title is at least in the conversation. Again, I'm not going to jump off of the we're going to win 9-10 games cliff again, even though, it's a possibility. I'm not quite chugging the orange Kool-Aid to that degree at this very moment, but it is possible. And again, you're hearing things from the locker room that this is entirely different. We did hear some of the same things last year in spring, though. So that's why we have to have a wait-and-see approach. But last year in the spring, there was a lot of talk of this is an SEC staff, and we're a lot more intense, and things are just operated way differently now, and there's a lot of competition. And then it obviously went to hell in a handbasket real quick, fast, and in a hurry, so none of that offseason talk ended up mattering. But it's nice to hear directly from some of the guys that are in the locker room competing that everything's different. Right? The routine's different. Their schedule's different. So now that they can wake up, they can sleep in, they can go to morning classes if they want to. Their football day doesn't start at the butt crack of dawn. So they get more time to do things, and they have more camaraderie amongst themselves because of that being different. and the dinner table, nutrition, all of that being entirely different. It's putting a new feel inside Boone Pickens Stadium. Does it mean it'll amount to a whole lot? Well, I don't know. But it's at least encouraging, because you could hear it go sideways too. And thankfully, that's not what we're hearing. It is almost that time. It is that season where all of us are looking to get a little bit back in life. Tax season just doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the extra guesswork that is unnecessary. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s, self-employment forms. The work you get is very, very dedicated to you. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it all. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off of your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. That is TurboTax.com/local. Make sure you go book your appointment today to get rid of the stress of tax season. Basketball's been making me kind of sad, so we're going to take a little bit of break from hoops and talk about wrestling. The Cowboys are still cruising for the most part. I think it's pretty crazy, the wrestling, and you're seeing more of it. There's a wider gap between the top teams and the bottom teams, like as it sits right now. The only team that could really probably compete with Penn State in any capacity for a natty is probably Ohio State. At the beginning of the season, Oklahoma State was a possibility. Nebraska was a possibility. Iowa State, possibility. Iowa State still is a possibility, but we get to go up against the Cyclones here after a little bit. So at the tail end of the season, we'll have that head-to-head to dictate who should be looking at a potential national championship race. But the Cowboys took care of Nebraska pretty easily. But if you notice the same thing I did, there's about, I don't know, after about 149, see, even 141. See, that's problematic for me. Correct me if I'm wrong. Landon Robidoux, a little bit of a different story. So 157 is probably not applicable. But for the most part, 149, 174, 184, 197, heavyweight. We have a lot of weights where we do not score any bonus points whatsoever. And it is frustrating, right? Cale Sanderson is a bonus points dude. David Taylor was a bonus points dude because he was taught that by Cale Sanderson. That's why Penn State wins the national title so much, is because they score bonus points in tournament time. And we're not doing that. Troy Spratley can do it. Rodney Ramirez can do it. Obviously, Jax Forrest can do it. Sergio Vega can do it. Casey Swiderski just had probably his biggest win of the season, taking down number 5, Chance Lemire of Nebraska, 7-2. D. Lockett, he can do it. But Alex Facundo, Zach Ryder, Cody Merrill, they don't score bonus points. Connor Doucette doesn't a lot, but he can. He has. He's shown the ability to. It was fun beating up on Nebraska, but it's also frustrating to know that we have way too many weights that provide no bonus points whatsoever. So like whenever you do get to that Iowa State duel, it's very likely that some unforeseen bonus points from somewhere is going to be the determining factor on who wins that. But shout out Troy Spratley. He's won a handful in a row now, getting himself a nice little major decision to kick things off. Ronnie Ramirez drops a pretty close one to number 8 ranked Jacob Van D. Then Sergio Vega gets a fall on Brock Hardy of Nebraska. Number 3 in the country, Brock Hardy of Nebraska. The same Brock Hardy that has had the ability to compete for national titles the last couple seasons. That Brock Hardy got owned by Sergio Vega. So that's nice. See, we need these bonus points here. And then Casey Swiderski, who I had a lot of anticipation for coming over from Iowa State. He's been very underwhelming, in my personal opinion, this season, but that was a massive win for him. So hopefully that is a changing of the tide for Casey Swiderski. Landon Robidoux losing to Antrell Taylor, who, if you watched the Nationals last year, like, he was arguably the best 157-pounder out there, was Antrell Taylor from Nebraska. So that's definitely not a bad one to lose, especially only by one. D. Lockett gets a nice top 10 dub. And then Christopher Minto did beat Alex Facundo. Silas Allred beat Zach Ryder. Cody Merrill did beat number 12, Camden McDaniel, 2-1. And then Connor Doucette defeated an unranked Cade Zeola, again, 2-1. It's the lack of bonus points that are going to be the most problematic, in my opinion, as the season progresses for the Cowboys. This is still a ridiculously good team with a ton of talent. And we'll get set up for the Southern Scuffle here before too long. Not the Southern Scuffle, but Northern Iowa, because Utah Valley got canceled. They're trying to make it back up. But after Northern Iowa, skip over a little bit, the beginning of February is that big duel in Stillwater, Oklahoma, against the number 3 ranked Iowa State Cyclones. And then we get to end the season with Iowa, which we have some get back. That's our only loss on the season, was to Iowa, 18-16. And a lot of things are different now. I mean, the lineup for Oklahoma State in and of itself is extremely different than, the national duels to start the season off. So we still have the opportunity to potentially crack that top 3. But until we get some more bonus points at the heavier weights, it's going to be difficult. But there's help on the way. I think the Rainey twins are going to be absolutely massive. They like to score points. Of course, Jax Forrest is going to do his thing. Drayson Ross, he loves scoring points. And he athletically is already far superior. He could probably be in the same position as Jax Forrest. Right, Drayson Ross could be wrestling in college right now and be competing at a top 10, top 15 level. So a lot of this stuff is going to sort itself out, right? But in the meantime, hopefully David Taylor can find some more bonus points, inspire these dudes, because we've got talent. We just don't score a lot of points after 149-ish, other than D for the most part. So anywho, it's nice to see that we can put, what was that, 12,500, something like that, in Galgraba for Bedlam. Hopefully we can do it again against Iowa State. And then hopefully we can have some fun in the season the right way with Iowa. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it. Dislike if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. The podcast for people out there, you're everything that makes this work. Appreciate what you do. Stars. Leave some reviews. And don't hit the wrong buttons like I do. Later, taters.